Funny. I just now grabbed a piece of paper with your name on it and your number. Look at that.
No,
I was like, Dr. Z, I haven't talked to him in forever. How
been
are
a long
you?
time, girl. Good
Yes.
seeing you. Good seeing you. You better believe.
Good seeing
Happy
you.
National Doctors Day. We salute you for your
Thank you.
service, especially through the pandemic.
We appreciate that.
How have you been, Dr. Eadie?
I've been well.
Or how are the young people coming along?
Everybody, they're coming along. What I've been seeing is that, the health wise, they've been doing pretty well, but mental health wise, academically, there's been some challenges.
Like what? I mean,
Just I think from the isolation initially, I think social isolation, especially during the times that is really vulnerable for them when they're learning how to socialize, elementary, middle school, and all of that. It's been a challenge where they've just been cut off and then, kind of reintroduced. So it's kind of slow going.
Dr. Z, is it such a thing as too much isolation?
Oh, no question. It's too much isolation. How the isolation that we feel is just sort of exaggerated through a pandemic. The isolation and lack of, as we've talked about before on the show, the lack of discipline given throughout the thought process in our schools just gets perpetuated to a high extent. You add another sense of despair that continues to over exaggerate, but yet in reality, the condition that we all live in already is black hope. Everything is just exaggerated when you got a situation such as this. And it's been 2 years, and people have suffered gigantically. That's why I said as far as I was concerned, the whole pandemic was immeasurably poorly handled from the CDC standpoint. I don't have a problem calling nobody out, but we were
Well, I
taught.
gotta say, oh, we've been blessed. Hold up.
Yeah.
Dr. Asante Dixon, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Good morning.
Now, Dr. Eadie, Dr. Dixon, I think Dr. Z already knows he runs the AME. It's Ascension
Ascension
Medical.
Medical Educators.
Okay, well, welcome to the show. These are some of your colleagues, and happy National Doctors Day to you. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
So,
you.
first question I posed, Dr. Dixon, was: is there such thing as too much isolation? Can I have a colleague who hasn't really been outside in 2 years?
Is this to me?
To you, Dr. Dixon.
Absolutely. There is such a thing as too much isolation. Everything is a spectrum. I think we've all been forced inside because of the pandemic, and even that is questionable in retrospect as to the degree of lockdown that we all were living under for those, at least that first year. But I think that we've now, the pendulum has moved all the way to the contralateral side where you've got individuals who can't move and they're stuck inside and they're still suffering from the effects of isolation. And now we're seeing greater degrees and manifestations of isolation disease, if you will, anxiety, depression. Um, the degrees of household domestic violence has increased significantly, and that is domestic violence with men being the recipients as well as women. And these are all the manifestations of excessive isolation and fear.
Dr. Eadie, in your initial comments, you spoke about mental health. I don't know that I can ignore the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is two black Hollywood icons, the center of discussion. Is that a symptom of potential mental health challenges?
I,
So first,
you
I
know,
say,
I was
oh, I'm sorry, sorry.
no, no. I I was just thinking that unfortunately I missed the not unfortunately, but I did miss the actual event, but I did replay it. And the first thing that came to my mind as a physician clinician was, it's been a lot of mental health going on, a lot of pressures, a lot of and not to say that they've been unaddressed, but we've just been hit over and over again. Whether it's COVID, and for us as African American people, we've been hit with watching things on the news throughout the pandemic of people being killed, and George Floyd, and all of these things, just kind of compounded on top of one another. And I'm sure with those two icons. I'm sure they had a lot of pressures with their industry of things that they weren't able to do during the pandemic, making movies, things they're used to doing. And that may also play a role in it as well. But yes, absolutely. I believe mental health was definitely a key in that.
So Dr. Z, no one is immune to the effects of isolation, the mental health challenge. Not even celebrities with super fat bank accounts. No one is exempt from the pressures that have come with this pandemic, huh?
No, not at all. Money never makes you bright. Never money doesn't make you right. Uh, However, I don't see the thing with Will and Chris as a part of a pandemic of mental health. As I said, the overall challenges we had long before a pandemic came just became exaggerated through that, and so we can use that as a conversation piece. That what happened on the Oscars was total dysfunction. There's no put it any other way. It's just two dysfunctional individuals who then sort of mirror society's thought process. I think the good thing, if it is anything good that can be nurtured from that confrontation, is it shows you how fragmented each person's perspective is. You can come from an alopecia standpoint if you want to look at that, but was it about that? You can look at how do we aggressively stand up for Black women, but was it about that? Or does it also go through Chris's situation where he handled a confrontation with splendid demeanor and ease and should be applauded? So we can go on because each person comes what I call the Tower of Babel thought process. The Tower of Babel, well, you talked in different languages, but it also had you function with different mentalities. And so we as people need to figure out how we have a conversation to then unite the mental aspects that each one of us brings to the table. And there are plenty from this confrontation, as we've seen. You've seen so many hodgepodge people with this opinion, that opinion. But when do we coalesce ourselves to one to look at what is the true answer to this situation that we as a nation and a world were confronted with?
Dr. Dixon, you're interested in growing the next generation of doctors. Is this a teachable moment for your students?
Well, first, I want to say, I want to echo Dr. Z's statement. I don't know what is going on between Will Smith and Jada Pinkett. I mean, we're not friends. Text. They don't talk to me. I only saw what everybody else saw. And now, in the past week, we've had hundreds of people on Instagram and Facebook giving their opinion as to what the dynamic of their relationship is. I have no idea what was going on there. But I agree with D in that there was a bit of dysfunction going on. Now, as far as students in the pipeline, navigating the pipeline to medical careers, it's a little bit of a jump to say that this is a teachable moment from a pure curriculum standpoint. But I can say, as far as underrepresented minorities, I can make an association between the behavioral dysfunction, if you will, as Dr. Z stated, that these students are going to have to navigate on their course towards physicianship. They are going to be operating in a majority non-Black environment. They are going to be forced to navigate blackness in a majority non-black environment and culture. They are going to have to deal with their own history, their own family dynamics, their own culture, and those two things often are not symbiotic. They're often at odds to each other. So there are going to be times when if you're not dealing with those demons inside, those demons are going to come out in ways that are antithetical to medical progress. So I think from that perspective, we can learn that when you don't deal with your mental health, for lack of a better phrase, eventually even big bad black men who are the coolest, strongest men in the world, you're going to decompensate, whether it be in your house with your wife or your husband, your children, or you might decompensate in front of a patient or in front of a colleague if you're not able to deal with those demons inside. That's probably the best teachable moment that we can use from whatever we saw in those 30 seconds on TV on Sunday.
On this day, National Doctors Day, I'd like to take a moment and celebrate the first black woman doctor, Rebecca Lee Crumpler, and according to Wikipedia, and also Dr. James McCoon Smith. Dr. Eadie, why did you become a physician, a pediatrician?
Well, back when I was born with a congenital defect that was called an omphalocele. And but on top of that, my mother passed when I was 6 of multiple myeloma. However, on top of that, Dr. Z's dad was my physician.
He was
So
mine.
I, he was yours as well, right? One fall. So I was able to experience and see for myself a black man um, as my physician, caring and taking care of my family. My mother and my dad thought enough of him to bring me to him. And later on, when I decided that I wanted to be a physician, I remembered back that, hey, I can do this because I saw this. And Dr. Z's dad had a way about him. I was only about probably up to 5. I think he passed when I was about 5 or so. I went to his funeral as well. Um, but I just remember the love, the feeling of that he gave and made me feel, even though I had to get that needle. And I wanted to be able to make moms and children feel good about themselves as well. And so just those memories is what I bring into my practice today. So I just wanted to heal. I wanted to heal people. So.
So, Dr. Z, is it safe to say you get it honest?
I guess. That's probably a good thing to go back and say. I grew up in this, so my movement and route to becoming a doctor is much different than many. I was part of my dad when he integrated the University of North Carolina Medical School. Like I said, I've been running around medical school since I was 2 weeks old. I've been called Dr. Z since I was 4, so I really had no choice just to go ahead and go with the nickname.
But your brother's a lawyer.
No, that's my cousin. I always want to call it my brother. No, that's my cousin third. Yeah, that's my cousin third. But as I was saying, most of this came up that I grew into this, and I think many of us need to look at when we go on routes to becoming physicians of any type, white or black. We have to bring a sense of personal growth. No matter what tragedies, no matter what things in our lives may help spin us in a direction, we cannot let that profession become us. And I think that's the biggest message we can give out to young doctors and anyone in any profession. I mean, we lose ourselves sometimes in the profession. I remember the other day I had a talk with some young doctors, and I brought up the miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson. And he said back then, He gave a great little analogy where he went up to a place in New York, and he was with his friend who was a doctor. And he talked about the patient coming upstairs, and the doctor says, "Oh boy, another person I can take a few dollars from." What his point was, you don't come into this for the dollars. You come in this for the heart and the art of taking care of people. I grew up in that. You know that. We started, Garwood Medical Center where Dr. Eadie was a patient. Those things are gone now. You don't even have that power. You had a whole center governed by black folk. Where is that message now? We can educate a 50 million black doctor, but if we walk like white doctors, we'll do nothing but have a black face and a bad problem. And so we as a society need to start looking at who we build and who we are. And that comes from being a man much and a woman much more than being a doctor. So yes, I came in a different route, but I come from a whole different background. I've been doing this 40 years now, and I come from a man that dedicated himself to be a man, who knocked on the door of North Carolina, University of North Carolina, for 10 years after graduating from North Carolina A&T, until a white university let him in, because he wanted to be like everybody else. So he didn't grow himself as a doctor. He first took growing himself as a man. And when you grow as a person, the doctor comes easy. I want to leave that message to everybody. Fix yourself. We'll worry about your profession a little later. Maybe we'll put some real good black doctors, some real good doctors that care about people more than your dollar and your checkbook.
Dr. Dixon, why did you become a doctor?
I became a doctor mostly because I saw physicians in my family. And I think that was a huge influence on my direction. I had two uncles that were physicians, and we grew up with them being the pillars of our family. And that just rubbed off on me, and it was an easy choice for me to say I'm going to follow in their footsteps. So my dad always used to say I should have been a lawyer because I was always arguing with people. Um, but I think physicianship came naturally in terms of C1 technique, and I am now.
Dr. Eadie, are you pleased with the number of black women doctors today?
No, I'm not. I'm not pleased with the number of Black women nor Black male doctors. We represent 2%. We call ourselves the 2%ers, but um, they're way more capable people that could be in medicine. And that's why I mentor young college students, because and actually I had the opportunity to mentor some high school students through Disney Academy, because there are many kids that just don't have any kind of background, any family members that can kind of guide them through. And if you could have a mentor who is already in the profession, the likelihood of a student being able to navigate sooner, like what Dr. Z was saying, his dad, I think he was saying that it took him 10 years, maybe to get into a program, because he probably had to navigate and figure out, and I'm sure in those times it was a little different, but it's still not so easy to get into medical school. And not just because people are not smart enough, it's not that. You have to understand how, what the path is. And so that's why we call it I call it the underground pipeline to medicine, because really, we have to reach back for those who have made it. When I look at my journey, I have to say, well, what mistakes did I make, and what things that I do right, that may have, helped me, and who helped me, because there was someone who helped me as well. So I have students at a couple of the HBCUs that I've connected with, some of the physicians that I knew, in order to get get them a path, looking at their resumes, looking at their letters that they're sending in, having them come into our offices and rotate, giving them opportunities to meet someone that looks like them, that's in the profession that they want to go into. All of those things are very important, and we have a responsibility to do that.
Dr. Z, when I see you on television speaking for the entire state of Maryland, that ought to be enough to inspire some medical students, some black medical students, huh?
No, no question. I think those situations where we're visible and put people, at least people can see as a general population, that the someone looks like me is something that I can now see is possible. I think the greater situation of what I was doing to COVID is to open the population to the possibilities that you need to learn to get immunized at that time. But if we take it to more of a sort of national or existential process outside of the COVID, it is all about motivating the people from the hood. My talks and discussions were about showing that we as black inner city doctors can talk as articulately as any other doctor. I can then go on and do anything intellectually as any other doctor. You don't separate yourselves, white or black, from who I am. I can too motivate the planet. I can too give you what you need to do to navigate a pandemic. And I too can give you what you need to navigate yourself out of the social dysfunction, which we continue to put ourselves into. So more than anything, the words that I heard back from folk with such great pride, those positions that I took. But the pride I want you to do is learn how to stop the destruction of 350 murders in Baltimore City, how to get young people not to have a 1.0 GPA at 41% in high school in Baltimore. If we don't cure that, there's no hope for black doctors. There's no hope for black people. You're not going to pull black doctors from that who can't even navigate themselves out of a high school to get to medical school. As Dr. Eadie just stated, there is a black underground. You got to know what you're doing. You got to know how to move. And so, I've done an immeasurable amount of kids in the medical school. I'm teaching 20 NP students right now, white and black, on how to navigate society, not to be clinicians, because you cannot be a great clinician till you change the inner thought process of how you deal with society. I teach every student, walk in the room, what does it smell like? If it smells this way, then you got to treat it that way. You can't be so insensitive to people's needs because you're so power to hog as a doctor or anybody. You got to come down and be with the people and learn to be sensitive to the injustices and the ups and downs and the conditions that we grow as a population. So that's what I hope my time on TV did, Donnie. Much more than motivate doctors, I hope I motivated this planet.
I know that governor found out who you are. Uh, Dr. Dixon, I think this is a great time to plug Ascension Medical and what you're doing with young people.
So, my path and journey to physicianship was challenged, as most physicians' paths were. I came from a medical family, but still, when I went through college and medical school, I wasn't really sure how to navigate some of the classes. As was stated, I didn't know what classes necessarily to take. And my bumps and bruises came together about 4 years ago when I had an idea to create a company where we could reach back into underrepresented communities and teach and coach students about the system itself. What classes are they to take? What classes are they not to take? What are the expectations of GPA, extracurricular activities, volunteer activities? What does that mean to volunteer? Many students say, oh, I volunteered in the emergency room last summer. And then we ask, well, what did you do in the emergency room? How long did you do it? And how are you going to explain to an admission committee how volunteering in the emergency room is going to make you a better asset on the road to physicianship? As you write personal statements, are you making your personal statement reflective of your path, or are you showing the school what type of asset you will be, given that the school may be a primary care school versus a subspecialty school, an MD versus DO school? If you're not able to personalize your journey towards the outlay, or what, I drive a lot and I'm into F1 racing, and often as a driver, what you have to remember is your eyes have to be up and ahead and your hands will follow, right? And many of us, because we haven't driven these courses before, we've got nobody to tell us what turn is coming. We tend to keep our eyes right at the hood of the car. And what that leads to is a lot of mistakes, a lot of accidents, financial accidents, ego accidents. And remember that the system dissuades us from early. From the time we're about sixth or seventh grade, we are dissuaded from pursuing careers in medicine.
How so? How so?
Well, it's a it's a conversation that occurs from teachers, from family members, unfortunately, that are telling us, well, you can't do this, or you can't do that. Well, if a doctor looks like this and you look like that, well, how are you supposed to be that? Right? And that is something that we internalize, and it works in our brains even when people aren't around, that we can't do it. When we meet obstacles, instead of being told, hey, let's assess your performance and let's try it again, we are often told by teachers or, guardians of our academic course, hey, this isn't for you. Maybe
Somebody told you that?
Oh, of course.
Nobody ever told me I couldn't do something.
Oh no. I consider you lucky. Right? I consider you lucky. I think many people are actively dissuaded from pursuing science and particularly medicine. And I think the level of dissuasion is directly proportional to or rather, the level of dissuasion is directly proportional to the degree of trauma within that community.
Doc, I got to take that back. Polytechnic
I'll
High
also,
School,
I'd like to add to
Poly
that.
gave me the blues, and I never felt dumb in my life until I did 2 years at Poly. Come on, Dr. Eadie.
Well, I want to say that it starts way before then. So what I see in the educational system is if you haven't been on a track to science by third grade, your likelihood
Whew.
of getting on that track is a little harder because how the system is set up right now is if you're not in a certain math, if you're not in a certain math class by third grade, then you're not tracked, for the sciences. To me, that's just my opinion. How it works is that those kids are considered the track for AP goes on to college, sciences. It really doesn't have as much to do with English as the math. And my educational side of it, wanting to teach parents, is that pay attention to that. Because if you know your child is capable of the math early, and you notice that your child hasn't been tracked on that, you need to be talking to the guidance counselor, or you need to be talking to the vice principal of the school or whomever, to find out why not, because it has to do with testing. This is my opinion. It has to do with testing. And if you're not on that math track, you don't get on the science track. If you're not on the science track, by the time you get to middle school, it's just, to me, that's what I see.
Dr. Z, when I did get to Poly, I realized that a lot of those white kids had, like Dr. Eadie said, already had access to algebra. I had one year of it in the 8th grade at Lamel, But I knew these other cats, I knew they had seen this stuff before because they were just too smooth with it. They were comfortable. And I'm like, hold up. Something's going on here I don't see. But you went to Baltimore City Public Schools too, didn't you?
No, no question. Northwestern. I
The
didn't want to hang out.
Wildcats.
Yes, the Wildcats. My all my brothers went to Poly. Uh, so Poly has its place, and Poly still is a premier institution in the city of Baltimore. But always we could give so many subsets of stories. I've never had anybody dissuade me from doing anything, nor have I ever felt pressure here and there. I think when you get in situations and people put you on various academic or science tracks, STEM, etc., as we like to so wonderfully call it now. I think those are all good. I don't think they are prerequisites to getting into the medical school out there. I can take the lowest student and reshape them if that's his motivation. I think that depends on what we want to do. I think this is a good time to talk about science-oriented thought process, but the failure of the system is much greater than me to orient people to doctor. I think that can come just whatever I weed you out. But when I got a despair of high school students, not like our day, Donnie, who have a 1 point GPA, that's 41% of the high school students in Baltimore City. I'm not thinking too much coming out there talking about medicine right now. I need to get somebody a job and get some vocational stuff back into where it needs to be. So when we graduate to being a physician, you got to bring a whole bunch of people with you that may not follow that trend. And that's probably much more of our educational thought process that we need to push. We have too many folk left out in despair. Death, like the other day, 2 days ago, a 15-year-old shot 4 or 5 times in the back of his head. Now that's despair somewhere, son. I can't move you to be in a position to heal that kind of pain until I fix the guttural instinctive drives that have been lost in the city. The concentration of poverty is too high. And we can't continue to move ourselves into these educational, financial areas away from the general population. We need to all be in it together. My MD is another motivation for you to move yourself to a better state out of the hood and into a better educational state. And if I can motivate that, that will be it. Then I'll get my black doctor. And I'll get my black doctor with a little bit more of a heart to it than just the compassion of knowing figures and numbers. No, this is a big, deep problem we're in, John. Much more than being an MD.
Dr. Dixon, I remember you speaking before about having lost some of your childhood friends to violence.
Yeah, I listened to I listened to what Dr. Z just talked about, and I just want to be clear that there are two separate conversations. One is going to be, well, they're intercalated, but separate on a granular level. One is creating underrepresented students, giving them an opportunity towards medicine. The other is a seemingly extremely challenged existence of Black people in this country that is centuries in the making and systemically influenced, that we see manifest in violence, we see manifest in relationships with one another that are very short, shallow, and destructive. So that being said, your question is, have I seen individuals perish in their youth due to violence? The answer is yes. I have a talk coming up this Saturday in Washington, D.C. for National Black Accountants. I'm the keynote speaker there, and I'm giving away a little something here. Part of my talk, I'm going to be describing the death of a young man that is still in my head from when I was about 17 years old, and he was killed right in front of me. And how that image of that young man laying on his back in a pool of blood with his eyes fixated seemingly on me, still I see his face decades later. And I still can't make sense of why he would be killed. Somebody would think that the best way to get into this party, that we were being held at the door, they weren't opening the doors to this party, and people got agitated because they heard the music coming through the door, and it got people agitated, and so they resorted to violence, and this man was killed for really no reason at all. You know, these type of images are all too common in our communities, and they really affect the way we think. So you spoke earlier about Will Smith and Chris Rock. Will Smith and Chris Rock are just like me in that they've likely seen a lot of destruction, a lot of misplaced anger, and those images are within you as demons throughout your life. So, yes, I've seen destruction of people that look just like me, and that has affected me immensely. Immensely.
Dr. Eadie, so when we think about these little people that you are charged with serving, I'm gonna confess, Dr. Eadie, when I hear Bernie Mac saying that he will touch a kid up, when I think about how some of the behavior that I would have caught a backhand. I don't know about you, Dr. Z, but my dad had a mean, and I caught it one time, but he had the ring on too. I was running my mouth and it was whopper, whopper. I was like, I didn't know he was that fast. Dr. Eadie, do we correct children like we were corrected? Our generation was corrected growing up because our parents thought that a hind parts whipping was going to save our life. It was their job to instill in us what we needed to know. Otherwise, they would leave it for the 5-0, the police, or the CO, the correctional officer.
Well, I think you said it right there. Yes, it's definitely a new day, and yeah, society has changed. There was a time where, your behaviors, even in your neighborhood, you tiptoed past the neighbor, if you were going to do something because that neighbor, if the neighbor called your parents, you really were in trouble. So there is a difference in time nowadays, and I don't know what the association is with the lack of respect. Maybe it is for just human life, and just not respecting yourself. What does how does that associate with the lack of discipline? I don't know. There may be a true association with that. But yes, today, that's how it is. I don't know whether you want to say fortunate or unfortunate, however you want to say it.
One time, Dr.
Yes,
Eadie, I
there
messed
is
up
a
so bad.
lack.
I messed up so bad. My dad came home and said, "Take my clothes off." Now I heard a lot of things, but I had never heard that before. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, Dr. Dixon. He said, "Take my clothes off and go run your bath water." And it was kind of around that time I realized I was dead man walking. Dr. Z, correcting children.
Oh, I've already hit on that some of the day. I think discipline is high on the list of what is the number one problem in this society. I always tell people when I talk to them, the non-spankers won. And look what you came to. A dysfunctional society that has lost its way, and I don't know if we can grab it back again. Not whether we can spank or not is not the issue. I think everything is on the table. I think what is needs to be on the table is the care of discipline. Discipline is about love. Your daddy didn't backhand you, but within the love of his heart to correct you, to go around. You never hated your daddy from the backhand. I never hated my grandmother for the largest fly swatter I've ever seen in my life as she chased me through the house. You think you could always outsmart them, but they would wait me out. And then somewhere from the darkest creases and crevices behind the door, they would appear and provide me the discipline that I so much deserve because I was doing some bad stuff. Mischievous, but they put you back into order. And I think that's what I see now. We need to be put back in order. How do we get that order? We can debate, but it has to come with a care of discipline. We can't sit back, pass, and let a kid tear up a classroom and put them into the ER in handcuffs at 5 years old. That I have witnessed. That's insanity. That's societal genocide. It's ridiculous. And so we need to get back and get control of a society, just as nature does and controls itself. Nature controls itself from discipline. Man needs to control himself from discipline. Discipline is why you don't have a great sense of intellectual movement in our high schools. Discipline is the why we got the 50-year-old shot in the head 2 days ago. Discipline is why we have a system of society as a whole that does not fulfill its goals of graduation and moving people to be doctors and lawyers or anything. Just be good people. No, we have need some discipline, Donnie. And I'm with you fully. You know, we grew up in old school. I may be a few years, a decade above you, but I remember my daddy played Beethoven's Fifth on my behind. I thought the man was a musician, but he made sure that I understood about life and never led from the point of being my parent, but led from the point of being a man and constantly nurtured the betterment of himself so I could emulate how good people walk, how good people talk. That's what we need done. We got to have a society that does not go back and move to the suburbs when you got $1, but you stay right there in this homogeneous space that we had back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where lawyers and doctors and the janitors and the garbage men, we stood there together. We didn't separate ourselves. So each image brought you forth. That's the discipline we need, Johnny. Not just a spanking, but some societal control and some societal humbleness to get us out of this chaos.
Dr. Dixon, I need you to slide over to your right a little bit. The screen got a little adjusted. Perfect. Dr. Dixon, as Dr. Z was talking, you and I have spoken about this before. There's a different music playing today. Now, I knew when the pop came out, I knew my time was over because I'm old school, slow dance, always and forever, heat wave, or the freak. But they started doing all of the popping and spinning on the head. So, but the music today, 2022, it's not, to me, not the most articulated. They call it trap music. But I'm looking at the words, and in our day, if you called a female a B, you know at 3 o'clock, you fighting somebody. But now sisters are calling each other B, or help me with today's music. Where is it going, Dr. Dixon?
First, I'm from New York. I grew up in Long Island, New York, about 10 minutes from the Queens border. Grew up in the 80s, the golden era of hip hop music. Hip hop was a part of our lives. We lived it. We thought about it 24 hours a day. We made decisions based on music that we heard. So I'm very familiar with the importance of music in our lives. I also am aware that during those times, there were older people that thought that the music we were listening to was garbage. They thought that it was hood. They thought it was brainless, repetitive. I remember older men saying that, you guys are basically just taking music that already existed, putting it on a loop and rhyming over it. Back in our days, we produced the music from scratch. So sampling was not looked at as an art by many of the older generation. It was looked at as just laziness and just triflingness. So as I now have gray hair and I'm looking at young people, I'm always cognizant of my propensity to judge, because I agree with you. My ear, I hear noise and garbage. I don't understand what they're saying. It sounds like a lot of mumble to me. It's violence. It's narcissistic. It's degrading to women. But then our music wasn't completely free of that either. It's a gradient. It started somewhere and now it's moving to the opposite side. So that being said, where are we going with this music? We're looking at microcosm reflection of society. Society in general is seeing a significant degree of deterioration in terms of morals and ethics. Look at politics. When I was a kid, politicians were viewed as kind of sort of straight. They tried their best to be as honorable as possible, at least in public, and did their dirt kind of behind the scenes. But now, in the past 5, 6 years, what are we seeing? Politicians don't even try to be open anymore. They're leading their charge with the dirt. So we can't expect our young people living in a society where politicians are out now saying dirt first, people second, and expecting young people to then produce music like the Heatwave days, Always and Forever, and Hold My Love. That's not fair. We are going to act in accordance to the society and how it moves around us. So, in closing, where are we going with this? I have no idea. I just know that when politicians do dirt, they still end up with millions of dollars worth of stock and millions of dollars worth of inside trade information, and they live beautiful lives. When you and I, regular people on the street, end up in dirt, whether it be making dirt music or listening and reciting dirt music, we end up in jail, unemployed, being disenfranchised to the system because we don't know how to act, because we are basically echoing what we see or what we hear in this music. Even Will Smith, he's a special black man. He's got a lot of money. If I walked up on a stage and smacked anybody, black man or not, I would potentially lose my job. My reputation would be sullied, potentially in perpetuity. There are economic ramifications for the information that we absorb. And for black people, rap music is a huge influence as to how we think. So that music is not just mumbo and jumbo and the music of drug takers, as opposed to my generation, which is the music of drug sellers, right? It is also a soundtrack to the way we behave. And guys, I'm gonna have to step off. I gotta get back on this ER. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Dr.
Appreciate it,
Eadie, we're not going to steal much more of your time. Any final thoughts? We were talking about the violence, trap music, where it's taking us today, so on and so forth. Any thoughts? And then, your final thoughts on the day. And happy National Doctors Day. Thank you all. He's still here. Thank you too, Dr. Dixon. Thank you for your service. Thank you for caring. Thank you for giving us some airtime. There are a lot of people out here who are watching this and appreciate you. We love you.
I would just say I'm a music lover, so yeah, I'm not into trap music, but to each its own. I do think the message sometimes in music can be subliminal, but just in general, music for me got me through the pandemic. Sometimes feeling very isolated, feeling like nobody understood, what I was going through at that time because, coming in the pandemic, I was scared. And I don't think a lot of people talked about the fears and the fears of physicians and still being pushed out where everybody else was staying home, having children at home, having a husband at home, having a caretaker to my stepmom. Just not knowing, coming in, seeing newborns, and then the next minute, seeing another family where somebody looked like they're coughing, trying to keep everybody safe. And, once you left for the day, you're kind of peeling off your clothes and leaving them outside and rushing to the shower, and everything, just so you just didn't know. You don't want to be responsible for anyone's life. And just being able to just sink in some nights, even though I needed to sleep, I would just go online and just listen to DJs and just get my mind somewhere else. And music is healing. So for me, I love music, but yes, I think the message sometimes, and then some of the messages are funny and humorous, and things like that. Um, but just I like all genres. I like old music. I'm an old soul, so all of those old songs and 90s and R&B and hip hop. I listen to them all. So, but the trap, I just can't get into it yet.
As you were
So yeah, the
talking,
messages are important.
Baltimore. What came to mind is that Baltimore often loves club music. Dance my was it? Take my pain away. I got a problem.
I love some Baltimore club music too. So I love
Dr.
that.
Z,
I grew up on
what
that.
channel you listening to, Dr. Z?
The channel. I don't get too often to listen to anything that comes on that radio while I'm driving down the road. Still R&B. It's always, if I could sleep back to 30, whatever 30, whatever it was for Howard HUR, you always go back and think about Quiet Storm,
96.3.
96.3. You go back and as we talk about this and we put it into a situation, music, I think, is not the Dixon said earlier. It's the anthem. It's the anthem in the background noise of the generation. And it depends on what it motivates that generation to do. I think back in the day when you did the 60s and the 70s, it brought about a different cohesiveness because we had a different environment, had a different generational sound there. And so the sound now becomes somewhat harsher, impersonal, but you have a social media that we didn't have. You had to find the 10 cent and later 25 cent to put on that payphone. You could think a little bit. You could have a moment to digest. The digestion is gone. We are no instantaneously taking down people. Your emotions take over long before your intelligence, and then your intelligence can't check your emotions. On and on, and it seems like that background music, that sound that we hear follows that generational music. Does it dictate how you perform? You can sit back and argue that. We can have a good conversation on that guy. That might be a whole show in itself. But we need to look much more at what the anthem is and that folk listen to and what it does to you. And that's the biggest thing. Shoot, I'd love to put you back to some slow grind with the HUR. Be able to call and distill this negativity and destruction we have in Baltimore because trap puts you that way. It sounds like the anthem of destruction and not the anthem of love. I think we need to look at ourselves. We need to start bringing ourselves to a point that we have to look at feigned outrage, cancel culture from anybody. We soon adapt the negativity of that which is around us, and that becomes sad. I'm still pumping with my girl from the Temptations. That's the anthem I pull. When I pull young people in this office, they're going to listen to my mouth talk like the Temptations and not like some trap music. I'm going to give them some old school because old school may ease up the pain you feel and give you a chance to open up your emotions. And that's what we're losing. We're not getting enough analog juice into the song.
You've heard it, folks. Dr. Z, Dr. Eadie, thank you so much. We thank God for you. We thank God that you take time to talk to black media because without you, without black media, how do we get out to our people? So thank you for this opportunity.
Back to you, Donnie.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Enjoy it, all of you.
Happy National Doctors Day. My name's Donnie Glover. We'll be back at 10 o'clock with William Honolulu. Good morning, world. Thank you again.